Last week we learned about saying no to temptation. That was the story of Samson, the strongest man in the world, strongest man that's ever lived. And he had physical strength, outer strength, but he didn't have very much inner strength, very much moral character to do what was right. And when he was tempted, when there's something he really wanted to do, even though it was something God said not to do, he just gave in and did it anyway. Now, this week is lesson 7, and we're talking about choosing to fear the Lord. Now, when I say fear the Lord, I'm not talking about being scared. God doesn't want us to be scared of Him. He says that fear hath torment. He doesn't want you to be scared of Him. He said we can call Him Abba, Father. That's like Daddy in our language. But just as your mom and dad want you to respect them, so this word fear in the Bible means respect. Respect is caring about someone, thinking they're important enough, what they say, what they think, what they tell you to do is important enough to pay attention to, not ignoring it, not disregarding it, but valuing it. That's respect. And when you see fear the Lord, thou shalt fear the Lord always, it's talking about respecting God. And that's what we're talking about today. There are ways that we show respect in other situations. If you were at a parade and you saw the American flag carried by, what should you do to show your respect? You should stop whatever else you're doing, stop conversations, stand at attention, put your hand over your heart, and face the flag until it goes on by before you put your hand down and continue on. That's how you show respect to the flag. If you were in the military and an officer of a higher rank walks up to you, you should salute to show your respect. If you're in a discussion and somebody with more knowledge than you have about the subject wants to say something, you should stop and give them a chance to talk. That's respect. If your parent is telling you something they've told you many times before, what should you do? Now, you might be tempted to say, yeah, I know, you've told me 1,000 times, I know that. But that's not respect. And what you should do instead is to listen quietly till they finish speaking and say, okay, Mom or Dad, I'll try to do better. I'll do that next time. And so when we talk about fearing God, we're talking about respecting God. Your father and your mother, your mom and dad, expect to be respected. And so does God. He loves you. He wants you to love Him. He wants that loving relationship, but He wants to be respected too, and He deserves it. Now, I don't know if you remember what the Ark of the Covenant looked like in the Old Testament. It's lost to us. We don't have that anymore. We can't go and see it. But the Ark was a wooden box. It was built in the wilderness as Moses led the children of Israel across the wilderness toward the Promised Land. And it was to use in the temple for worship of God. And that was the place where God would inhabit, would stay. His presence would be there in the tabernacle with His people. And the ark was about 4 feet long, about 2 feet wide, and about 2 feet high. And ornate, it was wooden, it was overlaid in gold. The lid was made of pure gold, and it had cherubims, like angel-like creatures, cherubims on each side, on the ends, with their wings coming over and touching over the top, facing toward each other. And it was ornate and beautiful and intricate things carved on the edges of it. And in that Ark of the Covenant, and there were rings on it that pulls, covered in gold also. could go through, and so it could be picked up and carried by 4 priests with the poles, priests or Levites by the poles, but you couldn't touch it. And inside that were some very holy things. This was the most holy object in Israel. In it, they had the stone tablets of the 10 Commandments. And God had said to put a pot of manna, what he fed them with every morning in the wilderness, that appeared on the ground. And they picked it up, very small, golden-colored food that they could eat and make into different meals. A pot of manna, and Aaron's rod that budded when Moses' brother Aaron was disrespected by others of the tribes, and they said, "You're no better than we are. What makes you think you're in charge?" God said, "Okay, have Aaron put his rod, and all the leaders of all the other tribes put their rod before me, and in the morning we'll see which one God has selected." And in the morning, Aaron's rod had budded. It had new sprouts and buds off of it, and almonds. It was an almond wood rod, and none of the other rods did that. And so it was clear that God had chosen Aaron. He was special. He was different, and God had validated that. And so his rod was in the ark also. And then the book of the law. And that's all that was in the Ark of the Covenant, just those things. And once a year, the high priest would go in and make a special sacrifice and sprinkle blood on the altar for the sacrifice for his sins and the sins of the people. It was kept in the Holy of Holies, the most holy place on the very inside of the tabernacle, their temple that they had in the wilderness. And when it was moved, when the cloud would move and the nation of Israel, the Hebrews would be moving somewhere else, God was leading them, they would have to cover that. Levites would cover it in special coverings so it wouldn't be seen by people as it passed by gawkers as it passed by, and it was carried by the poles. It was very holy, very special. Now, just as sometimes today we might not respect God as much as we ought, in Bible times you had the same thing happen. In the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 4, we see that Israel had gone out to battle against the Philistines. And verse 2, and the Philistines put themselves in array against Israel, and when they joined battle, Israel was smitten before the Philistines, and they slew of the army in the field about 4,000 men. And when the people were come into the camp, the elders of Israel said, "Wherefore hath the Lord smitten us today before the Philistines?" And they had an idea. They said, "Let us fetch the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of Shiloh unto us, and when it cometh among us, it may save us out of the hand of our enemies." They were putting all this faith in it, in the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of God, and they were forgetting to respect and to obey and to ask the God of the Ark, the God of Israel, their God, what they should do. They said, "Oh, when it cometh, it shall save us." So the people sent to Shiloh that they might bring from thence the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, which dwelleth between the cherubims. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God. And you remember those 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests, but they were very wicked young men, sons of the high priest, Eli. And when the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel shouted with a great shout, so the earth rang again. What does it mean when you say it rang again? There was an echo off of the distant hills and mountains. You could hear it echo back, and the Philistines could hear that. And they said, "What is going on?" And when the Philistines heard the noise of the shout, they said, "What meaneth the noise of this great shout in the camp of the Hebrews?" And they understood that the ark of the Lord was come into the camp. And the Philistines were afraid. They were very afraid. They knew what God had done to the nation of Egypt in protecting Israel and forcing Egypt to let the Hebrews go. And they were afraid. They thought the God of the Hebrews was in this box, in this ark, and that if that was brought against them in battle, there's no way they could stand a chance. But they decided that they would do their best. They said, "Woe unto us, for there hath not been such a thing heretofore. Woe unto us! Who shall deliver us out of the hand of these mighty gods? These are the gods which smote the Egyptians with all the plagues in the wilderness. Be strong and quit yourselves like men, O ye Philistines, that you may be not servants unto the Hebrews as they've been to you. Quit yourselves like men and fight." Let's behave like men. Let's be as brave as we can, gentlemen, and we'll go against Israel and see what happens. And the Philistines fought, and Israel was smitten, and they fled every man unto his tent. And there was a very great slaughter, for there fell of Israel 30,000 footmen. They'd lost 4,000 men in the first battle, but this time they disrespected God. They took the Ark of the Covenant out of the tabernacle, took it out to the battlefield, exposed for everyone to look on. They took it into battle. They never asked God. He never told them to do that. That's not what the ark was for. And they risked the ark being captured. And that's in fact what did happen. And the ark of God was taken, verse 11 of chapter 4 of 1 Samuel. The ark of God was taken, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were slain. And there ran a man of Benjamin out of the army and came to Shiloh the same day with his clothes rent and with earth upon his head. When they were in grieving, they would tear their clothes and put dirt on their head to show how sorrowful they were. And when he came, Eli, now Eli was the high priest, Eli sat upon a seat by the wayside watching, for his heart trembled for the ark of God. Eli knew they had messed up. He knew it wasn't right taking the ark of God out of the tabernacle and into battle against the Philistines. God had never said to do that. And when the man came into the city and told it, all the city cried out. And when Eli heard the noise of the crying, he said, "What meaneth the noise of this tumult?" And the man came in hastily and told Eli. Now Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were dim that he could not see. He was nearly blind. And the man said unto Eli, "I am he that came out of the army, and I fled today out of the army." And he said, "What is there done, my son?" And the messenger answered and said, "Israel is fled before the Philistines, and there hath been also a great slaughter among the people. And thy two sons also, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God was taken." And it came to pass, when he made mention of the ark of God, that he fell from off the seat backward by the side of the gate, and his neck brake, and he died. For he was an old man and heavy, and he had judged Israel 40 years. When Eli, the high priest of Israel, heard that his two sons had been killed, and especially that the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of God, had been captured by the Philistines, was no longer held by Israel, but was held by their enemy. I don't know if he passed out. I don't know if he had a heart attack. He fell over backwards, and when he hit the ground, he broke his neck, and he died. Now, the Philistines consider that a great victory over Israel, a battle where they kill 30,000 of their enemy and capture the Ark of the Covenant. There were bragging rights for that. This was like a trophy that they could show their people. So look what we took from Israel. And they paraded the Ark of the Covenant through the streets of Ashdod, one of the biggest Philistine cities. And that night they put it in the temple of Dagon, the fish god, the god that they worshiped. They put it in there next to Dagon, and it spent the night there. In the morning, guess what? Dagon was fallen off. He fell off his pedestal, this idol, this statue, and was laying on the floor. And the priests of Dagon didn't know what had happened. And they set it back up, and the next night, it was in there again, and in the morning, Dagon not only had fallen to the floor, but his head was broken off, and his hands were broken off and laying on the floor. Now, God punished the Philistines for having the ark. And everywhere it went, well, first in Ashdod, we think that they were overrun with mice, and their crops, their food growing in the fields, their wheat and barley and those things were destroyed by all these little mice eating it. That's the best explanation. And they had emerods or hemorrhoids. Now this was something that made their bottoms hurt. It hurt to sit down. That sounds like a silly thing. It seems kind of funny, but it wasn't funny to them. They couldn't work. They couldn't concentrate. They were hurting. Every time they sat down, it hurt. And they said, "Get this thing out of here." And so the God of the Hebrews, the God of the Israelites is punishing us. Get this thing out of here. And it was taken to Gath. And the people of Gath had the same thing happen to them. And they said, "No, you got to get this out of here. This can't stay." And so they sent it on to Ekron. When the people of Ekron saw the Ark of the Covenant coming, they were going, "Oh, no, don't let that thing in here. We heard what happened at Ashkelon and at Gath. We don't want that here." And they were trying to figure out what to do with it. God was punishing the Philistines for taking the Ark of the Covenant. Finally, they decided, their wise men decided, let's do a test here. Let's see if it's really the God of the Hebrews punishing us or not. They took a new ox cart. They put the Ark of the Covenant on there. And they said, "Now you can't send it back without sending an offering of some kind to the God of Israel. If you've upset him, you got to give him some kind of a gift." And so they made a little box, fancy box, and had 5 golden mice. That's why we think that mice had eaten up their fields. And 5 golden emerods or hemorrhoids, the best image they could make of the thing that was hurting them in their bottoms. 5 golden mice, 5 golden emerods, and put those there now because of the 5 lords of the Philistines, the 5 major cities, the 5 leaders or lords of the Philistines, 5 mice, 5 emerods. Put it on the cart. Attach 2 milk cows to the harness to pull this cart. And let's see what they do. These are cows that mama cows, and they had baby cows. And they were still wanting to be with their babies. And they took them out, and they took the calves away and took them back toward the barn, took them back home. They said, "Now let's see which way they pull the cart. If they pull it back home, go after their calves like they normally would, we'll know that it was just a coincidence. These things just happened, and the God of Israel didn't do anything to us. But if the cows take off and leave their babies and head for the border of Israel, we'll know that it was the God of Israel that did this." And as soon as they take those cows back and told the cows to start moving, they took off in a hurry for the border of Israel. And the Philistines knew that it had been the God of the Israelites punishing them. Now, as this cart rolled into Israel, near the border of Beth Shemesh, they were out reaping the wheat harvest in the valley. And they saw the cart coming. They recognized it was the ark of God. And they started yelling and whooping and rejoicing, and people came from all around to see what the ruckus was. And they said, the Ark of God is back." And they rejoiced to see it. They lifted up their eyes, saw the ark, and rejoiced to see it. Chapter 6 of 1 Samuel, verse 14. And the cart came into the field of Joshua, a Beth-Shemite, and stood there, where there was a great stone, and they clave or cut the wood of the cart, and they offered the kine or cows a burnt offering unto the Lord. They broke up the cart. We're going to use the wood for a fire, for a burnt offering. They cut up the cows to use them as the burnt offering before God. And it was right to want to offer a sacrifice to God. The Levites took down the ark of the Lord and the coffer that was with it, wherein the jewels of gold were, and put them on the great stone. And the men of Beth-Shemesh offered burnt offerings and sacrifices unto the same day unto the Lord. And verse 19 says about God, and he smote the men of Beth-Shemesh because they had looked into the ark of God. Even he smote of the people 50,000 and 70 men. 50,070 men died. The people lamented because the Lord had smitten many of the people with a great slaughter. And the men of Beth-Shemesh said, who is able to stand before this holy Lord God? And to whom shall he go up from us? And they sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kirjath-jearim, saying, the Philistines have brought again the ark of the Lord. Come ye down and fetch it up to you. And they did. And they put it in a private home of some of the Levites. And there it stayed. There it stayed for 20 years in that home before it was ever returned to the tabernacle and put back where it should be. Now, the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, had disrespected the ark of God. The people of Israel knew better. They disrespected the ark of God, taking it out of the tabernacle and into battle. God had never said to do that, and they risked it being captured, and it was captured. The Philistines disrespected the ark of God by taking it and parading it through their streets and putting it in their temple with Dagon, their idol, their false god. And then, when it was returned to Israel, they disrespected it again by some of them opening the lid and looking in at what was inside. No one was to touch that ark. Even the priests couldn't touch the ark. They could only put the poles through the rings and carry it on their shoulders by the poles. They couldn't touch the ark, but they did. And that day, more than 50,000 people died for disrespecting God. Now, God is a gentle God with us. He's a God of love. He wants us to know that He loves us. But He's also a powerful God. He created the heavens and the earth. He holds it all together. He deserves respect. And we can't expect to be on blessing terms with God if we do things to disrespect Him, to disrespect His house, to disrespect His word, the Bible. I sometimes have seen people toss their Bible somewhere carelessly or kick it over out of the way with their foot to make room for something. That's not the way to treat the Word of God. I've sometimes seen kids running up and down the aisles of the church and screaming and playing chase, and that's not the way to respect the house of God. And then when God tells us something that He wants us to do, to ignore it and do our own thing and disobey God is disrespecting God Himself. God wants to be respected. God deserves to be respected. Psalm 9 verse 2 says, I will be glad and rejoice in thee. I will sing praise to thy name, O thou most high. And that's the way we should be toward God. We should remember how high and how lowly, how holy and how wonderful and powerful he is. And we should respect him all our days. And then he can bless us as he wants to. I'll see you next week with another lesson. God bless you. Have a good week, boys.